Welcome, everyone. Glad to have you all here. My name is Leah Molatseli. I am a lawyer based in South Africa, and I'm also a head of business development here in South Africa for a company called Legal Interact. And I'm joined today by some incredible women. And this is the last part of the Women's Excellence in Law and Leadership series, powered by the Institute for African Women in Law. And if you are like me and love law and tech, this is especially for you. I'm joined by three wonderful speakers. Now, these are women that I've worked with in the past and currently, and they do exceptional work across the continent. The first one is Linda. Linda is based in Kenya. She's the CEO and founder of Lawyers Hub Kenya. Then we have Kelechi in Nigeria. So she is the regional head of IAWL Innovation Hub in West Africa. And then lastly, we have fellow South African Nerushka. So Nerushka is also a lawyer, and she's the director of technology and innovation at Norton Rose Fulbright. Now, before we kick off today's session, it's really around having non-traditional careers, as lawyers. And literally all of us are lawyers here, but we're doing something totally different in the tech space. And this is purely because, ultimately the world continues to change. And as it changes, one of the core things about success is the ability for us to actually grow. And you will see as we talk through the session how these women managed to actually pivot in their careers, which ultimately led to them really catapulting their professional careers. And we can't forego technology purely because tech continues to evolve. And even with the pandemic, it really just highlighted the impact that technology has, not only in the world, but also particularly in the legal industry. But despite that, women are underrepresented. And that for me is important. And this is why today's discussion is absolutely critical. Because if you are like me, you become more motivated and inspired if you see women who look like you and who have done incredible things. I hope that you will enjoy today's session. Please remember to use the Q&A chat box instead of the actual chat if you want your questions to be answered. We will be tackling them at the end of the session. So remember, it's the Q&A session. It's literally next to the participants tab on your machine. So feel free to share your questions with us before we start. Ladies, I know I'm long-winded, but welcome. Kelechi, I will start with you. You have been in, product management, and then now you are the regional head at IAWL in West Africa. Can you just share your experiences, being a woman? You're a lawyer and in tech. What is that like?
It's been an interesting, challenging, stressful experience because being that, so I'll just give a background. I started off in tech because I was working with a particular tech company, and I was working as the business operations person. So what I meant was I handled everything aside the technical part of things. And I didn't particularly understand the lingua. So it's like, we want to get this particular developer who is fluent in this particular language, Java, C#, Python, and it didn't make sense to me. I didn't understand what it was. And my boss at the time, who was interestingly of the male gender, always give the impression that I didn't know stuff or that I was dumb just because I couldn't relate to what was going on in the tech space. And yeah, I knew I wasn't dumb. My God, I'm a lawyer, right? And I decided to just check out or try out what this tech thing was about. And that was how I got into tech. And yeah, it was really interesting to me. I became a software developer. And from there, by the time I started working with one of the top legal tech companies in Nigeria, Law Pavilion, I decided I wanted to pivot into product management. And it's been an interesting experience for me. One has been lonely because I would give an instance. By the time I was done with law school, called to the bar in Nigeria, and wanted to make that transition into tech. I got a couple of feedback from people saying, what are you doing? You spent 6 years in school studying law. What exactly are you looking for? Why can't you find it in
It's
law?
so relatable.
Yeah, and I felt bad at some point because, yeah, it was like I was just doing something that no one else had done and no one could conceive me doing, right? And I just had to keep going, right? And the interesting thing right now is those people that spoke to me like that are now the ones coming to me for advice. Oh, now I want to go into tech. How can I go into it? So I would say that it's been a challenging one for me, going in a space where I'm the only lady in the company, and there is no one to relate to that can pretty much understand my challenge as a woman, in the space or in the company. And it's just guys, and you know how guys can be sometimes, or how men can be sometimes. So I would say it's pretty challenging. I just had to find the strength to move on and to continue. But I think now, right, I'm able to connect with a lot more people, a lot more women in the space. So I do not feel alone right now. For instance, I've connected with Leah, right, Nerushka, Linda. So I don't feel alone right now. So I feel connected to a community of women. And there's a lot of narrative right now, a lot of discussions around more women in the space, more women being involved, more women taking the non-traditional path. So I feel a lot connected and bonded and relating to people or women that may or may not be going through challenges that I've gone through before. Thank you.
Wonderful. So what I'm getting really is stay connected. Basically, build your community. Speaking of which, Nerushka, so geez, you were a CA, cabinet attorney at Norton Rose, and then literally right now you're a director. How has that progression been like for you, particularly such a niche area of technology? Can you share your experience with us?
Sure. Thanks, Leah. It's a pleasure to be here on this really, really great panel today. So my journey is definitely not a traditional one either. I was lucky initially to join a firm that had a number of different specialist areas in law, which is Norton Rose Fulbright, South Africa. I didn't know what tech law, privacy law was at the time when I started my articles. You hear about things like banking and corporate finance and all these fancy things, and you think, maybe that's where you should end up. But then all these other niche areas that you don't really get exposure to, until you have, you meet somebody who's working in the space. So what we do with candidate attorneys is every 6 months over your 2-year articles period, you rotate into a different department. And my fourth rotation was in the technology law team. And it was only really when I got there that I saw what the work was, that I got an interest in it, and that I wanted to stay, and specialize in this field. And what really drew me to it and kind of moved me away from other areas is that you didn't do the same thing every day. Tech law and privacy law, it's something every day there's a new headline, every day there's a new development, every day there's a new technology. Things are ever evolving. So you can't be, you can't be like this 30-year working in the same field for 30 years and everything and everybody comes to you, because literally if something was created yesterday, how can you have 30 years of experience in it? So it was that type of fast pace and change in the field that really drew me in initially, and that kind of kept me here, I guess, till today. I spent, about 7 years from kind of candidate attorney to senior associate in my first stint at Norton Rose Fulbright. And in that period, I also did all sorts of things. I didn't stay in a traditional lawyer role. I also was in a business development role. I was also in a innovation role and a product development role, exploring all sides of the business. And then eventually I took the leap into entrepreneurship in 2017, because I just saw so much of opportunity again at every intersection of tech and law. There were so few people who actually understood a lot of the opportunities, and I loved to teach other people. So I just saw a gap where I could, take the opportunity to provide that level of awareness and training to others. So I spent a lot of time speaking at events, training corporates, training other lawyers A lot of what I did was really focused at other lawyers who had an interest but didn't know where to start and where to get information from. Because I also believe it doesn't matter what type of law you practice today, there's a tech element to everything. So if you feel, oh, I'm a litigator, I don't need to understand law, I don't need to understand tech, well, I've got news for you. Our courts are moving digital. A lot of disputes that we have today are with regards to, who owns the code, who owns the copyright, privacy law. We're going to have class actions soon. So if you're not going to take the time to upskill, it doesn't matter what practice area you sit in, you're really going to be left behind. So that's what I did for about 5 years. And then last year I returned to head up the tech and privacy law team, which I was with previously, and very proud to say now that I'm leading a team of all females. So I have a number of tech and privacy law lawyers coming up under me, and really we do a lot of exciting work. We're a very young team, very new team in the market. And excited about the work that we're doing. So my journey was obviously not the traditional one where, you go up the ranks. I did a lot of stuff in between, but I feel like all of that, is really, really adding to what I can bring back to the business today.
The common thread between the two of you is the diversity in terms of experience. And I think it gives, people, different perspectives in terms of their ability to perform and do what they do. It's actually very inspiring. Thank you so much. And for the attendees, please do not forget to jot down your questions and share them in the Q&A box. And don't forget to follow the Institute for African Women in Law. Hello, Linda. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Nice to see you, Leah.
Nice to see you. So having this chat around, non-traditional legal careers, and I mean, Lawyers Hub has been doing incredible work, and this is literally from the Africa Legal Innovation Week to next week's conference, the Africa Law Tech Festival. I mean, so much that you have been unpacking, not only in the legal tech space, but also in the law tech space in terms of policy development and advocacy. Obviously, you're a woman, you're in tech and in law. What has that experience been like for you?
Okay. I think it's been such an interesting experience. I have never wanted to be a traditional lawyer. And my mom found it very problematic to, the choices I was making right through campus, and I was keen on how to do pro bono legal work in creative ways when I was in university. And then once I got out, I just couldn't fit in a traditional role. I was looking for ways in which I could innovate the law. I didn't quite understand technology, and I wasn't a straight out techie. And so many people, I think my very first employers found me just impossible because they thought that I was coming in to disrupt, and people weren't looking for disruption. They were just looking for sometimes efficiency, But I did try out my hand in, different things, worked for university, and then, got into the nonprofit sector, worked for anti-corruption campaigns. And then eventually I just sat down and thought, what do I actually like? I like to innovate. And so I stumbled through lynda.com. I was looking for something that I could, a domain that I could preserve. So I thought I was the first Lynda who thought that they needed a domain. And then I found there's like 1,000 other Lyndas, including LinkedIn, that eventually bought lynda.com. So lynda.com was a coding site where you could learn to code. So I tried my hand in coding. I found it really difficult at that point. And then I realized that there was a gap in policy. There was such a huge gap between tech and the law, especially in Africa. And so I thought, why not just immerse myself within the policy space and be able to lend a voice within the policy space. And so one of the things I did was to first, I really embed myself within the tech ecosystem to understand how tech works, how techies work, what are their challenges, and then how to fill in that gap. And so I just started going for developer events, coding events, and then eventually, just got that niche. So the Lawyers Hub began as that space where people could actually, express themselves. So they wanted to get into legal tech in improving the efficiency of lawyers, or you wanted to get into policy where you wanted to fix the policy issues that arise from the technologies that people have invented or are working on. I think my learnings, and they really, resonate with my two other speakers who I totally admire the work that they do, is simply, sometimes to be misunderstood first, that people just don't understand you. They don't understand how they could spend so much money on you to be this traditional lawyer, and you just aren't being that person. And then because the legal tech market and even the tech policy market in Africa really is young, and that means that you do more. There are people who've asked me questions like you just do law and tech, like that's it, because we have traditional lawyers who do a lot of things. They do conveyancing, they do, they litigate on everything, they do commercial. That's the traditional lawyer. They don't understand how you can actually just specialize and then specialize in this niche sector of law and technology. And even within law and technology, that you can simply just say, I do policy alone, or I just do legal tech. They simply just don't understand it. But I think the market in Africa is maturing enough to have us fit within that, to be able to actually specialize. Like if you look at lawyers in Europe, you just find a privacy lawyer who works on GDPR, and maybe they has, it's really specific because the market is huge enough to handle that sort of specialization. So I hope that we get to that, sort of size of market. So those will be my few remarks.
Sure. Thank you so much. And then again, the running theme is diversity and experience. It gives you a broader perspective in terms of being able to do what we do. Kelechi, speaking of broader experiences, look, so you're probably the only coder between the four of us. Any suggestions, for people who are joining in terms of, different career options at the intersection between law, tech, and innovation?
Okay, so I'll come from like maybe three sides. One would be being a lawyer, right? So that means that you're able to work in a tech company as an in-house counsel, give advice. That's a different career path. It's not necessarily the core traditional part where you get to go to court and you're combining things. You have a niche practice, which is technology law, and you are giving advice. And I mean, in Africa here, particularly Nigeria, where you wake up one morning, you have a regulation, wake up the next morning, you have a different regulation, and you're top of your feet trying to fix the problem, you will really get busy. And no day will be the same. Yeah. So, and the second part I would go with is being in tech itself, right? So it means that you are deciding that you've had a good experience in law, which I did, and you want to just toe the path of tech. So you either want to be a developer, coding contracts, right? Or you want to be a designer, or you want to be a product manager or a data analyst. There is always going to be that connection back to our roots, which is law. The other part would be you deciding that you want to develop solutions. That's being an entrepreneur yourself. So you feel like there's a lot of things going down in the legal space, and I think that I have the best idea on how to disrupt the system, and I want to build this. So I have my team together, we're building solutions to solve this problem, to decide court proceedings, to give electronic law reports, to ensure facilitate access to justice for people. So these are like the three broad parts I see that, anyone can decide to go into. You can decide to go into core law, right? Being an in-house counsel, a data protection lawyer, a tech lawyer. You can decide that you want to be hands-on in tech, or decide that you want to build solutions. So I think it's like the three broad ways. But I think most important for all these things is, connecting to a community, right? One thing I'm very particular about, what I've learned from the tech ecosystem, is there is always a community for someone. You always find your tribe. So whether you decide to go into core tech, or you decide to go into core law, or build a solution for yourself, you would always find your tribe. Thank you.
That's so true. I mean, look at us. Coming back to Linda, you mentioned a very diverse background. Can you chat to us specifically about some of the challenges that you faced, as you were building, and how you overcame them? And this is really for individuals that are in the room that are trying to do what we are doing and, just help them along the way.
I consider myself a young, maybe an outgoing young lawyer. I think just in comparison to the age by which people practice law, they practice law until they're really old, until they're losing their memory. And so you'd find, I know a 70-year-old practicing law in Kenya, and maybe in South Africa it's older. And so building a name is really, really hard. You have to do crazy things to build a name. And some people do really crazy things on social media and TikTok just so that their names are memorable as lawyers. And so how do you disrupt that? I sat long and hard about why people should remember the name Linda Bonyo and what I could do that they remember that name. And I asked somebody to help me. How will I be unforgettable? It is really hard to be unforgettable. One, as a woman, because what do you bring to the table as a woman? You're female. The legal profession is really male dominated. We're beginning to have more female lawyers, but they're not in positions of power a lot. Kenya has changed. Now we have a female chief justice and the deputy chief justice. But then when you see how opportunities come and how the money goes, it still goes to the male lawyer. And so how do you make your name in this sector as an individual? And then two, how do you break free from, assumptions of society? For instance, when I set up the Lawyers Hub, I was so broke. We went into a building and convinced the landlord that, we have this great idea that we could run an innovation hub for lawyers. And they're like, that's a really cool idea, but we can't just give you space. And so we told them, like, in Kenya, you have to pay about 3 months of deposit for a lease and then 3 months of rent. We didn't have that because it was running into the millions. And so they asked us, they told me, Linda, we can give you this space, so you go find somewhere else. And I told them, I'm gonna come back in 3 months. And if you don't have a client here, then let's talk. So I came back in 3 months and they still didn't have someone. And they said, okay, we can think about it. So I told them I have 3 months of rent. You treat it as rent or deposit, but I just have 3 months of whatever you want. And then you can let me get into the space. And so they let us get in. When we got in, then people began talking about me dating a rich lawyer, a rich senior lawyer who funded me to get into that space. And I was like, why don't you say this about men? That men also date rich female lawyers who gave them capital, to run this. So I think one of the first things that any female lawyer needs to get out of is what society thinks. What society thinks about you, your career, whatever it is. Really, they just have few people whose opinion matter, and it's not everyone. And so the first time I was so stressed, I went into a room and cried. How can they say that about me? And then I was told, you don't have to care. Like, just grow some, strength and don't take this into consideration. So people talk about all those things, but they actually don't know the truth, that there's actually a landlord who believed in this crazy thing and said, you guys come in. And so eventually we go to pay off, whatever we owed. And, the lawyers have begun from that sense. So I think for me, those are the sort of challenges. And I went through Tech Women. I really love the program, and I want to recommend it for you. If you could join Tech Women program as it's a really good program for people in technology. And one of the things they taught us was the biases that women face in terms of practice. And they said, you need to know these things. And I looked at that framework. I felt like I should have known this as a little girl. You don't know how much you think about what people think about you. So we spend so much time thinking about, if I put on this hair, what will they think? If I take this career, what will they think? You don't notice that you're missing out on opportunity. You're missing out on taking risks, So I would say that, get into technology. People will first tell you that you don't know this thing. You are not an innovator. You're not a technologist. But the more you read about things is the more you write about things. And the more you write about things is the more you read about things. They're really, really interconnected. And so you begin to write about these things on social media, about innovation and technology and privacy, looking at new areas like artificial intelligence. Then you begin to actually be a guru in these specific areas. So don't care about what people think about you, because I think I am almost 100% sure that that's what women deal with most of the time. Just remove it. There are several members of parliament that I know that are female, and one of the things that I see that works for them is they just don't care. And in a good way, it gets them somewhere, especially when you're convinced about what you stand for, and you're comfortable in silence, in your solitude, that this is who I am and this is who I've chosen to be. And then the public will actually be comfortable with you. So go for those things and don't care about society things, because eventually they're going to talk anyway.
That's so true. Thank you so much for sharing. I hope it will be very helpful for the people who are attending. Speaking of which, COVID happened, and now there is some semblance, sort of some normalcy, people returning to work. And this is really, anyone, feel free to take this question. What type of guidance or tips could you give for women who are now returning back into the workplace post-COVID and want to make technology their ally?
So I think one benefit of the post-COVID world is pre-COVID it would have been quite a difficult task to perhaps negotiate some kind of flexible work policy with an employer, or make a life suitable to your needs or your lifestyle. Whereas now I think we've proven that work is possible away from physically being in the office. We've also proven there are benefits of being face-to-face and in an office. But perhaps it's time for us to find out what is the best of both. And each person is also unique. There's some people who want to be in the office 5 days a week for as many hours as possible. There's some people who want to come in once a week. Some people want to come in twice a week. Some want to spend the mornings, whatever makes sense for you. And, there's a number of things that can, factor into it, whether it's your family obligations, perhaps you have to pick up a child at 2 p.m. So maybe your office day, ends at 2 p.m., but then you log on again when you get home to catch up the rest of your hours or whatever it might be. There may be other demands in your life that require a flexible schedule that the post-COVID world can now accommodate that it may not have been able to accommodate before. I would say part of the reason I went back into corporate is that other people have now caught up with my lifestyle, because I was living that way for 5 years. If I needed to be in my pajamas all day, I'd be in my pajamas all day. If I had to go to events or be in meetings or dress up in heels, I'd spend the day in heels, but I did it according to my energy, according to what I needed for that time. And I didn't feel like the corporate world allowed that, because they wanted us all to be the same, bring the same energy every day, be the same person every day. And that wasn't for me. Whereas now I feel I can be a bit more authentic in the corporate world, because I'm allowed to have a little bit of both. And for me, it's part of the reason I'm back. So I think it's definitely an ally. And if your employer argues that you can't do it, then say, well, what have I been doing for the last 2 years? I haven't been sleeping. I've still been working and productive, regardless of COVID. So you've got a much stronger argument now.
True. There's a conversation to be had about being more result focused than actually activity focused, particularly when it comes to work. And literally the same thing. That's why I left corporate law, being a mom. It wasn't friendly. It wasn't friendly at all. And I'm now back in corporate, but more in the legal tech space, which is very, very, very flexible, and also allows me to be me. Because sometimes we have to own our individuality. And sometimes the legal profession doesn't allow it, and it's okay. It doesn't mean you're any worse off as a lawyer or whatever it is that you choose to. Speaking of which, let me go back to you, Nerush. So, you're well, it's not traditional, but you're still in the practicing legal space, right? What is your position around artificial intelligence and the type of impact that it has on women in law, but more specifically on women's rights in general?
No, sure. AI is one of my favorite topics to talk about. I think I just did a talk on this last week as well, the legal and ethical implications of artificial intelligence. And there's more and more questions right now around this topic than answers, to be honest. Gender bias, as well as many other biases baked into algorithms, is a very serious topic. And we're seeing these incidents not in some kind of half-baked AI. We're seeing it from the top tech companies who employ the smartest developers and data scientists in the world. And if these are the people who are creating, feeding algorithms with biased data, because you must remember the algorithm is only as good as the data that trained it. So the data that's now training the algorithms, the machine learning algorithms, obviously have systemic inherent biases built into that data set. And so we can't expect to have, beautiful outcomes on the other side. Whatever, systemic issues we had at the outset is just going to be amplified now with artificial intelligence, because artificial intelligence will pick up those biases, will pick up those data points and amplify those outcomes. And those can have very serious consequences, because a lot of corporates are now incorporating artificial intelligence in decision making. There's a field called automated decision making, in privacy law, and basically what happens is, data is fed into some kind of black box algorithm, and out on the other side, it'll tell you, yes, this person can get a loan, this person can't get a loan. This person must pay, $900 for insurance. This person pays $100 for insurance. This person can get a credit card. This person can't get a credit card. And so many other things that AI is being used to make those entry-level decisions. And there's good reasons for it. AI is very efficient. It can look at 10,000 applications in a much quicker time than an individual can review 10,000 applications. But what has it been trained to look at in those 10,000 applications? Is it being unfair to particular groups in those 10,000 and only selecting, perhaps people who have unfair bias baked into the system? And so we're not seeing how those decisions are being made and who are the ones being selected at the end. So oversight, governance, ethical principles, all of these, frameworks. And now every day I'm seeing a new AI governance framework and toolkit being published by somebody or the other somewhere in the world. So people are paying attention to the issue, but we're very far from solving the issue. And yes, if we had gender-based discrimination before AI, it's only going to be worse with AI unless we can solve these issues.
Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. Just a kind reminder to the attendees, to share your thoughts, social media, tag the institute, tag us, tell us, how you're feeling about today's session, and share some of the key learnings, literally anywhere on social media, preferably Twitter. Now, coming back to our session, I think we've spoken a lot about, specific journeys and nuances around, how you guys really accomplished what you have, which I think is huge. But there are some, and I think Kelechi touched a bit on it, but just from a broader perspective. I just wanted to hear your thoughts specifically on career opportunities for anyone, who's on the call and who's listening and wants to understand what are the options available for them, in terms of, law and tech specifically, as a lawyer, what can they do in the tech space, legal tech too, if you can just share your thoughts in terms of different career opportunities available.
So I already shared like a couple of things, but I think that I mentioned in-house counsel, legal engineer, legal analyst, legal specialist. So there's a lot of legal, but pretty much has to do with an intersection with law and tech, legal technologist, right? You can even be, so that's like going into the startup world or developing your own solution. You can decide to be a legal design thinking specialist as well. That's going into design thinking. What other option can I mention?
Let me join in. I think, there's a closely aligned aspect of legal tech that's still unexplored on the continent, and that is legal ops. So, if you're looking to actually get into that space, really do look into it, because legal ops has to do with creating efficiencies for in-house legal teams, for them to do what they do better. So you can become a legal operations consultant, It's actually very exciting work. You can tap into legal project management. Let me not take everything. Linda, what are your thoughts on this?
I think from what I see now, let me talk about maybe the policy side. There's a huge opportunity to develop new policies. And I've done quite a bit of work across the continent. It's done by non-lawyers, just because lawyers are not in technology. So recently I stretched myself and said, you know what, I'm going to be consulting across the continent on tech policy, that it won't just be my country. And I was surprised how far I moved. Like in a few weeks, I was consulting for the African Union, and I was like, what? You know, like on huge data governance projects. And then I noticed, oh my God, they actually do not have lawyers. And sometimes these lawyers, the lawyers who understand tech policy, are really young. And so sometimes we don't dream as big, you know. So the senior lawyers would not even see these opportunities because maybe they are the gatekeepers of these opportunities, but they actually don't know how to execute them. So I would say to begin to consult for new frameworks, like, you know, you look at what the conversations happening within the Africa Free Trade area. You know, there's now really good work on digital trade and how to come up with policies around digital trade. So that's some of the work that the Lawyers Hub is doing. If you look at startups are looking for lawyers. Like if you're just starting out and you are a lawyer to 10 startups and they just pay you some minimum amount of money, depending on your country and the legislation around, you know, pricing for legal services, you know, you'd be starting off way, you know, ahead compared to, you know, all the lawyers and how they started. I also just think that there's opportunity to also draft policy, like for countries, even regulations. Like if you look at your country now and consider, let's say, is there a framework for digital assets? Is there a framework for, let's say, Bitcoin? Who can fund that policy? Can you speak to them and say, you know what, we can come up with this regulation, or you can talk to government to do it, or private sector to do it? Like there's such great opportunity. In terms of privacy as well, I see a lot of consulting for privacy work. You can, you know, go through a certification course for privacy, become a privacy lawyer, and just make that link between foreign organizations that are coming to your country that maybe are EU-based, and, you know, help them comply and localize, you know, the privacy policies that they're doing. I also think there's opportunity in events and just looking at, you know, are you doing trainings? If you already have a skill set, are you, you know, doing trainings around these tech issues that you already know? Can you package a course? I've seen Leah do some really, you know, great stuff on teaching as well. And finally, I think there's opportunity to platformize everything that we're doing. Can you be that Amazon where people can actually buy products, like legal products, on your platform? Because we're used to, you know, selling legal products the traditional way. So if you're an entrepreneur, can you actually just change everything into a platform that you do? The opportunities, I think, are endless. Eventually, everyone is going to fight for these opportunities. And I'd say this in terms of time factor. And when is the opportunity and when is a good time to go for them? In 2013, I wanted to set up an Airbnb and I wanted to set up an Uber. My mother told me it's impossible. She was like, who is going to live in somebody else's house? Tell me, I cannot invest in that business. And then I told her about an Uber and she was like, nobody will ever take a taxi on an app. And I told her, this thing is good, I just don't have capital. I was really, really broken. Kenya was going to elections that time. And I eventually, you know, did an Airbnb in 2014. It was too early in the market, and wherever I took that opportunity was also too far from everyone else. Like it was a really posh area where people weren't taking Airbnbs in, you know, at that point. But those who did the Airbnb between 2015 and 2017, the market was really had begun to understood what this was, and there were, you know, there was a threshold of people interested. And then now, if you come to Nairobi, everybody's doing an Airbnb. Like, you know, there are more Airbnbs than the customers or the people. And so it's important to know who is the early adopter, where in time this is. And so I think for the legal profession also, it's important to really understand that now is a really great time to jump into technology. In another 3-4 years, whatever we're doing will not be unique. And so people like us will have jumped to doing something else, you know, we'd be doing some really interesting and new things. So I think the best thing to do would be get into the market now, be an early adopter, really study the market, and then begin to make your offerings and your skill sets also, useful.
True, and I mean, sometimes you actually have to build your own audience, literally, start from scratch and just do it, just a kind reminder before we actually start with the Q&As that we're going to actually address now quickly. Please don't forget to share, and also please don't forget to indicate your questions in the Q&A section of the platform. So you'll see a quick poll. Please completely, share it, vote, so that the institute can continue either doing this or more for you, because this is really for the community, and we hope that you are finding this useful. So let's get to the Q&A. So the first one is around, Chris asked, being from traditional male industry, what do you view as your biggest obstacle in terms of entering the tech space? Personally, from a skill set, mindset, and perspective, like, what do you bring into the industry? And I mean, anyone can take this.
Okay, so I would say for obstacle, it would be still your mindset, right? Because personally for me, yes, I have that challenge where people were like, actually I had more conversations from the female gender than the male gender, because like, what are you doing? People haven't done this before, right? Yeah, so I think about, in respect to challenge, at this stage right now, right, it's like, it's you have to be the one to do that, and if you don't, it could feel like you have to motivate yourself or find the inspiration to do, because there is a community, there is the connection, there is the bond, right? We have structures in place right now. Everybody wants to help, or let me not exaggerate. A lot of people want to help, right? But yeah, people want to, right? And then you are able to do that. So with skill set, I think it's just you. Depending on what you want to do exactly, I think you are enough, right? So depending on exactly what you want to do, what career path you think you want to tow, that will determine exactly how you get to develop yourself. But in the instance, on the background, the foundation, I think whatever it is you think you have is enough for you to get started. You don't need anything extra. You don't need to be special. You don't need to be unique and all those buzzwords that we use, right? You are enough. And then I think you bring yourself, in fact, you are the table, right? And I think, yeah,
sure,
that's actually what I think works.
Thank you so much, Nerush. So there's a question here from Sandra. So she asks, how are you able to develop yourself in such a niche area like technology in law as a whole? So maybe she's starting out and then she wants to understand how can they develop themselves.
Sure, no, that's a great question. And I think the answer to that is, if you're the person that takes the initiative to go out there and do your homework, you're already putting yourself ahead of the rest. If you're sitting back and waiting for others to feed you, you kind of follow the normal path, as it were. So what puts everybody else, ahead of the pack is, we live in the information age. If you have an internet connection, there's actually no excuse to not research a topic that's of interest. If you want to learn about artificial intelligence, there's an unlimited supply of information, from ground level to legal resources to technical resources. Anything where your interest lies, you can find that kind of area and upskill in it. And once you've learned, you can then also share your findings. And that's what social media is so great at, because you can then take an article you read and create 3 bullet points and say, great article by Leah Molatseli. She says XYZ, reshare her article, and now you becoming a thought leader on the same topic Leah wrote an article on, because you're the person that took the time to read it and summarize it for your audience out there. And if you continue and you be consistent over time on a particular topic, that's how you build, know-how and thought leadership in a particular area, and others start, associating you with that topic, because they see that you're putting the time and effort in, and you sharing content that's useful, that's insightful, that's other people want to have a look at, and slowly you'll see people start coming to you when they have questions in those topics. Obviously, the best way is if you can find somebody to work for who's already in that space, and you work with them. You can really, you get, there's nothing that beats that type of hands-on exposure to kind of the practice of law, if I can call it that. But to upskill, especially in these very new areas, there's just so much of opportunity that's at your fingertips, and all you need is an internet connection to do that.
Sure. So Linda, there's a question here from a fellow countryman, and the question is, from a Kenyan law perspective, in terms of your experience, how does one actually get into the tech space?
Okay, I think I would say this. First, you need to follow everything that Nerushka spoke about. Have a curious mind and read. And maybe I'll just contextualize it and say this. So 2 things first is, how do you read in this age when we are so distracted? But then also 2, how do you move with confidence? So I've been, sorry if I let you in on how my thought process a lot, but I really watch men, especially men in technology, and especially white men in technology. They just need confidence. Like, people don't know nothing, and they come to Africa, and you hear that they are just here for 2 months, and then they become this professor. And so I am applying the same energy. We're doing some crazy projects in Europe, because what do we need? We just need confidence fast, and we will fail many times. But if we don't start, we won't learn. And those who laughed at us when we started will not laugh at us in a few years, because we'll have more learnings than they do. And so I would say this: have the confidence of a white man who maybe went to Harvard or especially Stanford, because they sit down sometimes and just study markets and understand, this is what happens. Okay, this is the method to the madness. And then they have confidence. They come to Africa. They stay in, in Nairobi. Our tech ecosystem is really, and research supports this. It's really white dominated, including the capital. And so what you have is a lot of the startups in Nairobi are funded from Silicon Valley, but they don't belong to Kenyans. So what does that tell you? There's opportunity, but sometimes we don't see the opportunity the same way, or we just don't have the connections the same way, And so I'm going to just ask you to have some confidence, Sometimes you post some things and share what Leah is talking about, but deep down, you don't understand technology. But you must start. You must start somewhere and just have the confidence of a white man who went to Stanford, or maybe did not even went to Stanford for a networking event. Then let's go to the next step. How do you read? I think it's important to admit our context. For instance, I find that I can't just sit down to read an article the first time, like maybe take out a book or an iPad to read it just that way. There are too many things happening in my life. And so I downloaded an app called Speechify. Speechify is something, I think it's about $100 a year. And you get to listen to a book, whatever book, like even a PDF or a website, as maybe you're walking, you're exercising, you're doing several things at a time. And maybe if you are a reader of James Clear, he talks about habits and how to form habits. And he says that, make a system and let your habits sort of tie into each other, that when you're exercising, maybe you're listening to a book. So you're fixing your mind and you're also fixing your body and maybe your emotions at the same time. So you sort of have all these things happening at the same time. And so look for ways in which you can also upgrade the way you learn, instead of just simply looking at the traditional way that you have to sit down and read. You won't read because you'll be too tired. And so mix up these things. And then 2, just subscribe to memberships. For instance, the Institute of African Women, like they have mentioned on the chat, they do have a community. Join that community. And, I have learned that information, especially in Africa, moves within communities. There will be things happening, but then you'll find only the Yali fellows know about it. The things happening, you'll find only the tech women alumni know about it. And so begin to join these communities. If there's a Lawyers Hub community, for instance, join it. You'll be able to know what event is happening, what consultancies are available, what trainings are available. I think that really brings in information, more and more information, in your life. And then eventually, I think during the weekend, set aside some time to read. And I know we all have responsibility. You have church, you have kids, you have parties to go to and friends to hook up with, but just put in that 1 hour. And I've estimated it a lot of times. 70 pages is sometimes 1 hour and 15 minutes of listening to it. So just have a rough idea on this week. This is the report that was launched that is relevant to the kind of work I do. Let's say, for instance, technology. So you take 2 hours of your Saturday or your Sunday and listen to these reports. By the time Monday is beginning, you can ably speak at forums and you already know what happened within this particular sector. So begin to do that in a small way, and the power of compound interest and compounding things. Within a year, you know these things. And finally, I'd want to talk about free code camps that are available. Like if you join the communities you start following, let's say, threads on Twitter, you'll find that there are communities that are beginning to code. Within 9 months, they're learning how to code. So if you really want to code, there are also all these free boot camps and free communities that people are actually joining in to code. Would I want to learn to code at this point? I find it really problematic. My brain really is letting me down a lot lately. But if you're interested, join these communities and you always find support for people to help you.
Thank you so much. Speaking of coding, Kelechi, there's a question for you in relation to software development. Did it come naturally to you as opposed to learning the law?
The answer is no. In fact, it was a lot difficult. Right, yeah, it was a lot difficult. I questioned myself so many times, questioned my knowledge, my intelligence, right? But I think that it was just the way learning anything new can be hard. The same way when I was in school, learning the law was actually hard, but now I'm like, yeah, it was easy, right? So yeah, it wasn't easy for me. It was really difficult, but I wanted to do it. I needed to do it. That was like a lifeline for me, and I did it. All right. So yeah, nothing is easy. Even coming to the tech space, staying in the tech space, being relevant, making a name for yourself, nothing is easy. Nothing is easy. Yeah.
Agreed. And so there's a question around, being a young lawyer, joining the tech space, although you have no background in tech. And I think I'll take this one. So I joined the legal tech space, no background at all. And I think you just need to focus on your specific focus area. So I have a very strategic mind, and I'm analytical, if you can put it that way. And so business comes easier from a strategic, scaling perspective. And that is why I also ended up in business development in the tech space, legal tech space, purely, literally based on that. I can't code. Like Linda, I tried, that failed. But I think, it wasn't me. It really just depends on your own skill set and your niche, because legal tech, just like any other tech speciality, does not necessarily equate to you having to learn how to code. There are other areas and other ways that you can actually join the tech industry, and it really, really is dependent on your skill sets and your interests. And there's one question here for you, Nerushka. So Judge Menachem says that, how do you convince the whole country that working from home worked well during COVID and that it should continue? So they're heading to the Gender Commission here at home, and it's one of the issues that the judge intends to pursue vigorously. But indications is that there will be a lot of resistance in this regard. What are your thoughts on this?
Sure, that's a big question. Am I qualified to answer this? Let me put on that confidence voice that Linda spoke about and answer this question. So I'm not sure if this is a policy decision to be taken at a country level. I think it's a very much more almost private company by private company and even role by role decision. I think it's appropriate for perhaps knowledge workers, people who do their jobs kind of 98% on a laptop, mostly sending emails or coding or doing something that's in Word or PowerPoint or Excel. I'm thinking those type of roles are the ones that are conducive to more flexible lifestyles. If your job requires any type of in-person or physical component, which, if you're taking something the size of a country, I'm sure a lot of jobs in a country would have that. I'm not sure if a policy decision at that level is possible. I mean, I honestly can't tell you, but I'm talking about, you in your role, knowing your job is 98% online. can you then have that conversation with your line manager, your boss, your organization, your management to say, you know, why can't I have flexibility in my role because I was able to perform my role so well during COVID? Yeah, for a whole country, I don't know if it is appropriate.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And then one last one. There's a question around courses on tech product development, management, and law. Anyone know it? And very, very brief, where Joy can check out those types of courses?
I think I would say this. I think it's really important to separate what's the legal tech stuff and then the tech policy stuff. So do you want to maybe innovate? You know, you'll go into legal tech. Do you want to work within, you know, products, and, you know, you will go into that side of things. And so it's important, if you want to learn that, to also separate, you know, that. If you want to go into tech policy, for instance, then also separate it. That would you want to go into areas like privacy? Are you thinking on issues like digital identity? You know, so these issues that arise from the link between law and technology that are policy, regulation, you know, issues and compliance issues. So that's also very different. And so depending on what area you would want to do within the two, then you start looking at where is this sort of technology coming from and who's offering this. So for instance, a lot of the courses we do
very
offer some
brief. We're about to close.
I'm so sorry. Okay, so I would say this, just separate those two and then figure out exactly who's offering these courses, hardcore coding courses, and then also policy courses that are being offered. Apologies.
Thank you so much, ladies. I had fun as usual chatting to all of you, and thank you for taking the time to share your journey. We really appreciate it, and thank you to the Institute for you know, the invitation, and please continue to share the conversation online. And thank you to the attendees. We appreciate you also taking the time to join us and listen to the stories that we share. And don't forget to complete the survey where necessary. Don't forget to follow the Institute. And thank you so much. We will see you next time.